Maya reached the northern extraction point on the 16th day of what was supposed to be a 30-day examination. She stood at the edge of the designated landing zone, looking out over a landscape that bore no resemblance to the hell world she had been dropped into 2 weeks earlier. Where once there had been twisted metal and acid-scarred stone, now there were clear paths and stable ground. The air itself felt cleaner, freed from the oppressive weight that had hung over Kethmoran for centuries. The extraction team was not prepared for her arrival. Academy protocols assumed that the earliest possible completion time would be 25 days, and that was only for the most resilient species under ideal conditions. The monitoring station had to scramble to deploy their pickup shuttle early, and even then the crew could barely believe their instruments. Captain Morrison was the first to emerge from the landing craft, his weathered face showing a mixture of pride and amazement as he watched Maya approach. She moved with the confident stride of someone who had not merely survived but conquered every challenge thrown at her. Her makeshift equipment and improvised gear told the story of resourcefulness and adaptation that would become required reading in military academies across the galaxy. "Cadet Rodriguez," Morrison said, his voice carrying a note of respect that had not been there during their initial briefing. "I have to ask, are you requesting extraction?" Maya smiled and set down her pack, which clinked with the sound of materials she had gathered during her journey. "Not yet, sir. I have work to finish." The extraction team exchanged puzzled glances. No cadet in the Academy's history had ever refused early extraction from the crucible of torment. The very concept violated every assumption about survival psychology and competitive behavior. "Work?" Morrison asked. Maya activated her portable mapping system, displaying a three-dimensional representation of Kethmoran's southern continent. Red markers indicated the positions of surviving cadets scattered across the hostile terrain, their locations tracked by the Academy's orbital monitoring systems. 18 cadets are still out there," Maya said matter-of-factly. "Some are injured, some are lost, and some are simply running out of time. I cleared safe routes through the major threat zones. Now I need to guide them to safety." The concept was so alien to standard Academy thinking that the extraction team's commanding officer, Colonel Dextar of the Granite-born, required clarification. "Cadet, this is an individual examination. Providing assistance to competitors violates the fundamental principles of the test." Maya looked up at the towering, stone-skinned officer with the same calm confidence she had shown when facing the void, Spawn. "With respect, sir, I already passed the test. I reached the extraction point in half the allotted time while eliminating every major threat on the planet. Now I'm going to make sure my fellow cadets have the same opportunity to succeed." The Academy monitoring stations erupted in debate as Maya's intentions became clear. Some instructors argued that her actions constituted cheating on a massive scale. Others pointed out that she had already demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything the examination was designed to measure. A few began to question whether the entire concept of individual survival testing was relevant when dealing with a species that instinctively worked together to overcome challenges. Maya spent the next week conducting the most systematic rescue operation in the Academy's history. Using detailed maps she had created during her journey, she tracked down every surviving cadet and provided them with resources, guidance, and in some cases direct rescue from life-threatening situations. She found 3 Chitauri warriors trapped in a collapsed tunnel system, their exoskeletons cracked from acid exposure. Maya used shaped charges to clear the debris and medical supplies refined from local plant materials to treat their injuries. She then guided them to a safe route toward the extraction point, complete with detailed instructions and supply caches she had established along the way. 2 Etherian cadets had become separated from their support network and were slowly dissipating due to energy depletion. Maya located them using electromagnetic sensors she had built from salvaged equipment and provided them with access to the crystalline formations she had modified to support their energy requirements. The most challenging rescue involved a group of 5 cadets from different species who had become stranded on an island in the middle of an acid lake. The caustic liquid had eaten through their emergency equipment, leaving them without communication or extraction capabilities. Maya constructed a floating bridge from neutralized metal and organic materials that could resist the acid long enough for the cadets to reach safety. Each rescue operation demonstrated a different aspect of human problem-solving ability. Where other species might have relied on brute force or specialized evolutionary adaptations, Maya used intelligence, creativity, and an almost supernatural ability to find solutions using whatever materials were available. The Academy instructors watched her work with growing amazement and concern. Admiral Chen Quan found himself facing a crisis that threatened the foundations of military education philosophy. If humans could routinely accomplish what Maya had done on Kethmaran, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? She's rewritten our understanding of what's possible, he confided to Commandant Veltar during a private conference. 1 human cadet has eliminated threat levels that we've used to challenge our best students for over a century. Veltar's amber eyes reflected his own troubled thoughts. More concerning is her motivation. She's not competing against her fellow cadets. She's treating them as allies in a campaign against a hostile environment. That kind of thinking could change everything. On the final day of the examination period, Maya stood once again at the northern extraction point, but this time she was not alone. 18 cadets from 6 different species surrounded her, all of them owing their lives to her intervention. They watched as the main extraction fleet descended from orbit, a sight that many had never expected to see. Maya had not simply completed the crucible of torment, she had transformed it from a test of individual survival into a demonstration of collective success. Her actions had ensured a survival rate that exceeded the Academy's best-case projections by 300%. The debriefing that followed broke every protocol in the Academy's administrative manual. Maya was required to explain not just her own survival, but her systematic elimination of planetary threats and her comprehensive rescue operations. Her presentation included detailed biological surveys, geological analyses, and tactical assessments that were more thorough than anything produced by dedicated research expeditions. Cadet Rodriguez, Commandant Veltar said as the debriefing concluded, "You were assigned to survive 30 days on Kethmaran. Instead, you completed the examination in 16 days and ensured the survival of 18 other cadets. You eliminated threats that have existed on that planet for centuries and left behind infrastructure that will make future examinations significantly safer." Maya nodded calmly. "Yes, sir. Can you explain why you chose to exceed your mission parameters so dramatically?" Maya considered the question carefully before answering. "Because surviving isn't enough, sir. Any animal can survive if the conditions are right. But humans don't just survive. We adapt. We improve. We make things better for those who come after us. That's what separates us from simple predators." The graduation ceremony 3 months later was unlike any in the Academy's history. Maya Rodriguez received the highest honors ever awarded to a single cadet. But more importantly, her performance had forced a fundamental re-evaluation of human capabilities and military potential. Vice Commandant Zil Keth, who had orchestrated her assignment to the Crucible of Torment, as a demonstration of human inadequacy, found himself facing questions from his own superiors about why the Academy had been so quick to underestimate Earth's children. As Maya accepted her commission as a lieutenant in the Galactic Defense Force, Commandant Veltar asked her the question that would echo through military circles for generations to come. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, how many more humans are there like you?" Maya's smile was the same one she had worn when facing the Shadow Stalkers, the Bone Crushers, and the Void Spawn. It was the smile of a species that had been forged in the crucible of a hostile world and emerged stronger for the experience. "Sir," she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had redefined what was possible, "we're just getting started." In the years that followed, Maya's performance on Kethmoran would become the subject of intensive study and debate. Military strategists analyzed her tactics, xenobiologists studied her adaptation methods, and philosophers questioned what her success meant for interspecies relations. But perhaps the most significant impact of her achievement was the change in how humans were perceived throughout the galaxy. No longer were they seen as weak Deathworlders struggling to survive in civilized space. They were recognized as a species capable of turning any environment to their advantage, of solving problems that others considered impossible, and of treating competition as an opportunity for collaboration. The 15th day brought changes to Kethmoran that the Academy monitoring stations had never recorded before. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the northern mountain ranges, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. The electromagnetic readings from orbit showed patterns that defied conventional physics, and several monitoring satellites suffered system failures when they attempted to focus on the source of the anomalies. Maya felt the change before she saw it. The air around her began to feel thick and oppressive, like trying to breathe underwater. Shadows fell in directions that had nothing to do with the sun's position, and occasionally she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision that vanished when she turned to look directly. The Void Spawn had awakened. Maya had read about the creatures in the classified files Captain Morrison had provided, but the dry academic language could not convey the true horror of encountering one. The Void Spawn existed partially outside normal space-time, feeding on consciousness itself rather than conventional matter. They were beings of living shadow that could reach into minds and devour thoughts, memories, and sanity with equal ease. In the recorded history of Kethmoran, only 3 Void Spawn had ever been killed, each time by full military squadrons equipped with specialized weapons and psychic shielding. The creatures were considered so dangerous that most species' military protocols called for immediate orbital bombardment rather than ground engagement. The first sign of the creature's presence was the screaming. Not audible screaming, but a psychic shriek that bypassed the ears entirely and attacked the mind directly. Maya felt it as a pressure behind her eyes, a sound like breaking glass echoing inside her skull. Several kilometers away, she could see emergency beacons activating as cadets abandoned the examination rather than face this new threat. 2 Void Nomad cadets, members of a species renowned for their mental resilience, triggered their extraction signals within minutes of the creature's awakening. The Academy monitoring stations lost contact with 4 other candidates as psychic interference overwhelmed their communication equipment. Maya did what no rational being would consider. she began tracking the creature. Using her growing understanding of Keth Moran's electromagnetic patterns and her knowledge of theoretical physics, Maya realized that the void spawn's partial existence in normal space-time created detectable gravitational anomalies. The creature's presence bent reality around it like a massive object, creating ripples that could be measured and followed. She spent 2 days preparing for a confrontation that military strategists considered impossible. Working with salvaged equipment and rare minerals she had extracted from the planet's core during her systematic exploration, Maya began constructing something that should not have been possible with her available resources. The particle beam generator took shape slowly, built from the wreckage of mining equipment, crystalline formations that focused electromagnetic energy, and components cannibalized from her basic survival gear. Maya's understanding of quantum mechanics, combined with her practical engineering skills, allowed her to create a weapon that could theoretically damage a creature existing across multiple dimensions. The Academy observers watched her work with growing amazement and horror. The human cadet was not fleeing from their most feared predator. She was preparing to hunt it. Admiral Chen Quan found himself simultaneously impressed by her ingenuity and terrified by her apparent lack of self-preservation. Instincts. "She can't possibly believe she can kill a void spawn," muttered Commander Velketh, a Saurian officer who specialized in xenobiology. "The creature exists partially outside reality itself. Conventional weapons pass through it like smoke." "Her weapon isn't conventional." Chen Quan. By the 7th day on Keth Moran, Maya had transformed from a struggling survivor into something the planet had never seen before. She moved through the hostile landscape with the confidence of a creature born to this environment, her human adaptability, turning every challenge into an opportunity for improvement. The Academy monitoring stations orbiting high above the planet registered 12 emergency beacon activations in the first week. 3 cadets had been claimed by acid storms that could dissolve metal in minutes. 2 Etherian students had succumbed to poisoning from the planet's toxic plant life, their energy forms unable to process the alien chemicals. 5 others had been forced to call for extraction when the crushing gravity caused internal injuries that their species could not endure. Maya, however, was not just surviving, but thriving in ways that defied the expectations of every Academy instructor. Her bio readings showed optimal health despite the hostile environment. More disturbing to the observers was the steady decrease in local threat levels in her operational area. The first major sign of her success came when long-range sensors detected a massive explosion in the Shadow Stalker breeding grounds. The creatures had been a primary threat factor in the Screaming Canyons for over 2 centuries, responsible for the deaths of countless previous examination candidates. Overnight, their electromagnetic signatures vanished from Academy sensors. Admiral Chen Quan stood in the monitoring station's command center, staring at the displays that tracked each cadet's progress. The Chithari students were following their species' natural instincts, forming protective clusters and moving slowly but steadily toward the extraction point. The granite-born cadets advanced with methodical determination, their armored hides protecting them from most environmental hazards. And then there was the human. "Show me Rodriguez's movement pattern," Chen Quan ordered. The holographic display shifted to show Maya's route across the southern continent. Instead of the straight-line approach favored by most species, her path wove through the terrain in what appeared to be random wandering. But the Admiral's trained eye recognized the pattern immediately. "She's hunting," he murmured, and the other officers in the command center turned to look at him in surprise. Maya had indeed been hunting, but not for food. She was systematically eliminating the planet's major predatory species, turning Kethmaran from a death trap into a marginally safer environment. Her targets were chosen with scientific precision, based on careful observation of the planetary ecosystem. The Bone Crushers had been next after the Shadow Stalkers. The massive arthropods were the size of Earth's extinct ankylosaurs, with carapaces that could deflect plasma fire and claws designed to crack open the toughest armor. They hunted by detecting vibrations in the ground, emerging from their tunnels to drag victims into their underground lairs. Maya had spent 2 days studying their behavior patterns before implementing her solution. Using salvaged metal and explosive charges created from her basic chemistry supplies and local mineral deposits, she had constructed seismic charges that mimicked the vibration signatures of large prey animals. When the Bone Crushers emerged to investigate, they found not helpless victims but carefully placed explosives that collapsed their tunnel systems. The creatures that survived the initial detonations were trapped underground, their primary hunting grounds rendered inaccessible. The elimination of the Bone Crushers had secondary effects that Maya had carefully calculated. Their tunnels had been a major navigation hazard, forcing travelers to take longer, more dangerous routes around their territory. With the creatures neutralized, Maya had opened a direct path northward that cut days from her journey time. But it was her solution to the plasma wraith problem that truly impressed the Academy observers. The energy beings were perhaps Kethmoran's most feared inhabitants, creatures of living electricity that fed on the life force of other organisms. They were immune to conventional weapons and could drain the bioelectrical energy from most life forms in seconds. Maya's approach had been elegantly simple. Using her understanding of electromagnetic theory and materials scavenged from the planet's industrial wreckage, she had constructed a series of Faraday cages throughout her operational area. The metal mesh structures disrupted the plasma wraith's coherent energy patterns, causing them to dissipate harmlessly into the atmosphere. More importantly, she had identified the source of the plasma wraith's power, a network of crystalline formations that focused the planet's natural electromagnetic field. By carefully damaging key crystals with precision plasma torch cuts, Maya had disrupted the entire network, effectively starving the energy beings out of existence in her territory. On the 10th day, Maya encountered her first fellow cadet since the initial drop. Thexnal, the Chithari warrior she had known from classes, lay dying beside a pool of contaminated water. His exoskeleton was cracked in multiple places, and his compound eyes showed the glassy stare of someone approaching death. The Chithari had been poisoned by toxic spores from a carnivorous plant species, and the contamination had spread through his hemolymph system. Academy protocol was clear in such situations. Individual survival took precedence over assisting fellow candidates. The examination was designed to test personal capability, not teamwork. Maya ignored the protocol completely. She spent the next 6 hours treating Thexnal's injuries using medical supplies she had refined from local plant materials. Her field chemistry knowledge, combined with her growing understanding of Kethmaran's biochemistry, allowed her to create antidotes that neutralized the toxins in his system. When Thexnal regained consciousness, his first instinct was to attack, thinking Maya was a threat. She calmly explained the situation while continuing to tend his wounds, her manner so matter-of-fact that the warrior found himself accepting her help, despite every instinct telling him to maintain his competitive advantage. "Why are you doing this?" Thexnal asked, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of his species' language. Maya looked up from sealing his cracked carapace with organic adhesive she had synthesized from tree sap. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "But the examination will continue. You're not competition anymore. You're injured. There's a difference." The concept was alien to Chithari thinking, where strength determined survival and weakness meant death. But as Maya worked to save his life, Thexanol began to understand something about human nature that the galaxy's military analysts had missed. Maya provided Thexanol with detailed directions to the nearest emergency beacon, along with supplies. That would keep him alive long enough to reach it. She also gave him maps of safe routes that avoided the major predator territories she had already cleared. "I do not understand your species," Thexanol said as she prepared to leave. "You could have taken my equipment, left me to die, improved your own chances of success." Maya shouldered her pack and smiled. "That's not how humans work. We're stronger when we help each other, not when we abandon each other." The Academy monitoring stations recorded the entire interaction with growing amazement. The human cadets' actions violated the spirit of individual competition that the examination was designed to test. Yet her reasoning was so fundamentally sound that the instructors found themselves questioning the examination's basic premises. Admiral Chen Quan replayed the recording for the third time, paying particular attention to Maya's final statement. "She's not treating this as a test," he realized. "She's treating it as a mission." The distinction was crucial. A test was something to be endured, survived, completed with minimal damage. A mission was something to be accomplished, optimized, dominated through superior strategy and execution. Maya's next demonstration of this philosophy came when she encountered a group of stranded Etherian cadets on day 12. The energy beings had become trapped in a mineral formation that disrupted their cohesion, leaving them unable to maintain physical form long enough to escape. Rather than simply helping them reach an emergency beacon, Maya analyzed the geological structure that had trapped them and devised a permanent solution. Using shaped charges and precise excavation, she altered the mineral formation's electromagnetic properties, creating a safe corridor that future travelers could use. The rescued Etherians were initially suspicious of her motives, unable to understand why she would expend effort helping competitors. But as Maya explained her reasoning, they began to grasp something profound about human psychology. "You are not competing against us," one of the Etherians observed, his light pattern communication, translated by Maya's universal interpreter. "You are competing against the planet itself." Maya nodded. "Exactly. Kethamoran is the enemy, not you. If I can make the planet safer for everyone, I've won something more important than a test score." By the end of the second week, Maya's influence on Kethamoran's ecosystem was becoming impossible to ignore. Threat levels in the southern continent had dropped by 60%. Safe travel corridors had been established between major landmarks. Emergency supply caches had been created at strategic locations, stocked with materials that could save the lives of future travelers. The Academy instructors found themselves facing an unprecedented. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Kethamoran's atmosphere, and Maya felt her stomach lurch with the sudden turbulence. Through the reinforced viewport, she caught her first glimpse of the prison world that would be her home for the next 30 days. The surface looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares, a twisted landscape of jagged mountains and acid-scarred valleys shrouded in perpetual storm clouds. 47 cadets sat strapped into their crash harnesses, representing 12 different species from across the galaxy. Maya recognized most of them from classes and training exercises, There was Thexanal, a Chithari warrior whose compound eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence, his exoskeleton bearing the ritual scars of his hive clan. Near the front sat 3 granite-born cadets, their rocky skin already adapting to the ship's environmental readings by developing thicker protective layers. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, distorted by atmospheric interference. Attention candidates. We are beginning individual deployment. You will be dropped at random coordinates across the southern continent. Your objective is simple. Reach the extraction point at the North Pole within 30 standard days. Emergency. Beacons will be provided, but using one means immediate failure and expulsion from the Academy. Maya checked her gear one final time. Basic survival equipment, a water purification unit, emergency medical supplies, and a plasma torch for cutting through obstacles. The Academy had been deliberately minimal in what they provided, forcing cadets to rely on their own skills and adaptability. The first drop bay opened with a mechanical grinding sound, and one of the Etherian cadets disappeared into the howling wind below. Maya watched through the viewport as his energy form flickered and danced through the atmosphere, already beginning to adapt to the planet's electromagnetic field. Rodriguez, Maya, human, drop zone 7 Alpha, the intercom announced. Maya stood and made her way to the drop bay, feeling the eyes of the other cadets on her. She could hear their whispered conversations, the mixture of curiosity and dismissal, in their voices. The small human, they seemed to be thinking, won't last 3 days on Kethmaran. The bay doors opened beneath her, revealing a churning maelstrom of acid rain and lightning. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying with it the acrid smell of sulfur and ozone. Maya took a deep breath of the ship's filtered air and stepped into space. The fall lasted longer than expected, her emergency chute deploying automatically when sensors detected safe deployment altitude. Even through her environmental suit, Maya could feel the planet's crushing gravity trying to flatten her against the ground. The gravity was nearly twice Earth standard, making every movement require deliberate effort. She landed hard in what looked like a dried riverbed, her suit's shock absorbers taking most of the impact. The parachute dissolved automatically, its biodegradable fibers eaten away by the planet's corrosive atmosphere. Maya stood slowly, her muscles already protesting against the increased gravity, and took her first look at her new home. The landscape around her was a maze of twisted canyons and razor-sharp rock formations. The air tasted metallic even through her suit's filters, and she could see where acid rain had eaten through solid stone like water through sugar. In the distance, something roared with a sound that made her bones vibrate. Maya activated her navigation unit and found her position. On the digital map, the Screaming Canyons, the file had called this region. She was roughly 3,000 kilometers from the extraction point, with terrain that would challenge even the most experienced explorers. She began walking north, her steps careful and measured on the unstable ground. The planet's surface was littered with debris from its industrial past, twisted metal and broken machinery half buried in the acid-scarred earth. Maya made mental notes as she traveled, cataloging potential resources and hazards. Within 2 hours of landing, she had identified 3 different types of local flora and begun analyzing their chemical composition using her portable scanner. The thorned vines that grew in spiral patterns around the canyon walls contained trace amounts of useful minerals. The phosphorescent moss that clung to shaded rock faces produced compounds that could neutralize some of the planet's environmental toxins. As the local sun began to set, Casting the landscape in shades of red and orange, Maya found a defensible position between two large boulders and began setting up her first shelter. Rather than use her emergency shelter, she constructed a lean-to from salvaged metal and stone, saving her manufactured equipment for true emergencies. The night brought new challenges. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in the space of an hour, and Maya could hear the hunting calls of nocturnal predators echoing through the canyons. She built a small fire using chemical fuel tablets and gathered plant materials that she hoped would mask her scent from whatever was prowling in the darkness. 3 hours after sunset, she got her first look at Kethmaran's native wildlife. The shadow stalker was roughly the size of an Earth Mountain lion, but moved with an unnatural grace that suggested it was not entirely bound by normal physics. Its fur seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it appear as a moving absence in the darkness. Maya watched the creature through her night vision scope as it investigated the area around her shelter. The shadow stalker's head turned toward her position, and she found herself looking into eyes that glowed with their own inner fire. For a moment, predator and human regarded each other across the alien landscape. Then the creature melted back into the shadows, apparently deciding that Maya was not worth the effort of hunting. She remained awake for the rest of the night, adding observations about shadow stalker behavior to her growing database of planetary information. Dawn brought new discoveries. Maya found tracks near a small pool of relatively clean water, evidence of multiple species that came here to drink. She set up her water purification system and began processing liquid for her journey while studying the various footprints in the mineral-rich mud. Some tracks belonged to herbivores, creatures that fed on the hardy plants that grew in this hostile environment. Others were clearly predatory, with claws that could rip through metal and stride patterns that spoke of incredible speed and aggression. Maya made sketches of each type, building a picture of the local ecosystem. By her third day on Kethmaran, Maya had established a routine that would have impressed her academy instructors. She rose before dawn to hunt small game using snares. She had constructed from salvaged wire and local materials. The protein was necessary to maintain her strength against the planet's crushing gravity. She spent the morning hours traveling north, making steady progress through terrain that would have stopped most other species. Where the granite-born would have tried to smash through obstacles and the Etherians would have attempted to float over them, Maya found paths around, under, or through barriers, using minimal energy and maximum efficiency. The afternoons were for shelter construction and equipment maintenance. Maya had begun modifying her basic gear using materials scavenged from the planet's surface, improving her tools' effectiveness for the specific challenges she faced. Evenings were for study and planning. She analyzed samples of local plants and minerals, tested their properties, and looked for ways to use them to her advantage. She updated her maps with new discoveries and plotted the most efficient routes toward her destination. It was on the third night that Maya encountered her first major threat. The pack of shadow stalkers approached her camp with coordinated precision that spoke of advanced intelligence. There were 5 of them, moving through the darkness like liquid shadow, their eyes glowing points of malevolent fire. Most cadets would have activated their emergency beacons at this point, calling for immediate extraction rather than face creatures that Academy files listed as nearly impossible to kill. Maya did something different. She studied their approach patterns, noting how they moved and communicated with each other. When the pack leader finally revealed itself, stepping into the light of her campfire with casual arrogance, Maya was ready. She had spent hours observing their behavior and had identified their weakness. Shadow stalkers hunted by vibration and electromagnetic signatures, but they were nearly blind in bright light. Maya triggered her emergency flares simultaneously, flooding the area with brilliant white light. The shadow stalkers recoiled with sounds of pain and confusion, their natural camouflage useless against the artificial illumination. But Maya wasn't content to simply drive them away. While the creatures were disoriented, she moved with the swift efficiency that marked her species at their most dangerous. Using her plasma torch as a weapon, she eliminated 3 of the 5 stalkers before the survivors could retreat into the darkness. The battle was over in less than 5 minutes, but Maya knew it was only the beginning. She had learned something important about Kethmaran and its inhabitants. The planet's deadliest predators could be beaten, but only by understanding their nature and using that knowledge against them. As she dragged the Shadowstalker carcasses away from her camp, Maya felt a grim satisfaction. The Academy instructors, monitoring from orbit, had expected her to cower in fear or call for help at the first sign of. Maya Rodriguez stood in the cold metal hallway outside Commandant Veltar's office, her hands steady at her sides, while her heart hammered against her ribs. The Kepler Station Galactic Military Academy stretched around her like a small city floating in space, its corridors buzzing with the nervous energy of final examination season. Through the massive viewing ports, she could see the stars wheeling slowly past as the station rotated to create artificial gravity. 2 years she had spent here, among beings from across the galaxy. And still the whispers followed her everywhere she went. Deathworlder, they called her when they thought she couldn't hear. The savage from the 3rd rock orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Maya had learned to ignore the comments, but they still stung like tiny needles under her skin. The door to the Commandant's office hissed open with a soft pneumatic sound. Commandant Veltar looked up from behind his massive desk, his reptilian features unreadable as always. The Saurian stood nearly 8 feet tall when he rose to greet visitors, his scales shifting from deep green to silver depending on how the light hit them. His amber eyes held the cold intelligence that had made him one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. Cadet Rodriguez, Veltar said, his voice carrying the slight hiss that marked his species. Please, be seated. Maya took the chair across from his desk, noting how it had been specially modified to accommodate the various body types of the Academy's diverse student population. Her own human form fit comfortably enough, though she suspected the padding had been added more for the comfort of species with exoskeletons or bony protrusions. Your academic performance has been exemplary, Veltar continued, consulting the holographic display that materialized above his desk. Top 5% in tactical analysis, first in xenobiology, and your practical combat scores are remarkable for someone of your species' physical limitations. Maya kept her expression neutral, though she bristled inwardly at the casual dismissal of human capabilities. It was always the same with the other species. They saw humans as soft, weak, lacking the natural armor of the granite-born, the multiple limbs of the Chithari, or the energy manipulation abilities of the Etherians. However, Veltar continued, and Maya felt her stomach drop at the word, there remains the question of your final examination assignment. The Commandant touched a control, and the holographic display shifted to show a crimson data pad that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Maya had seen other students receive their examination assignments over the past week, but none of their data pads had been that particular shade of red. "The crucible of torment," Veltar said, and Maya felt the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "A month-long survival examination on the abandoned prison world of Kethmoran." Maya had heard whispers about the crucible, late-night conversations in the dormitory common areas that stopped abruptly when she entered the room. It was the Academy's most dangerous practical examination, designed to push even the hardiest species to their absolute limits. "Sir," Maya said carefully, "isn't that examination typically reserved for species with enhanced physical durability?" Veltar's amber eyes regarded her steadily. "Indeed, the granite-born with their natural armor, the void nomads with their resistance to radiation and toxic environments, species that evolution has specifically adapted for survival in hostile conditions." "Then why, Vice Commandant Zilketh has expressed certain concerns about human participation in the Academy," Veltar interrupted, his tone carrying a note of distaste. "He believes that a proper evaluation of your species' military potential requires testing under extreme conditions." Maya felt a cold anger begin to build in her chest. Zilketh was a political creature, one of the Etherian administrators who had opposed human admission to the Academy from the beginning. His kind communicated through patterns of light and considered themselves the galaxy's most evolved species, both intellectually and morally. "Of course," Veltar continued, "you could request a transfer to a more conventional examination, the standard survival course on Temperate World 7, perhaps. No shame in recognizing one's limitations." The offer hung in the air between them like a trap. Maya understood the game being played now. Zilketh wanted her to fail spectacularly, to prove that humans didn't belong among the galactic elite. If she took the safer option, she would be branded a coward. If she accepted the crucible, she would likely die, serving as an object lesson for future human applicants. "I'll take the crucible," Maya said without hesitation. Veltar's head tilted slightly, a gesture she had learned indicated surprise among his species. "Cadet Rodriguez, I feel obligated to inform you that the crucible has a 60% casualty rate. Of the students who attempt it, more than half require emergency medical intervention. Some do not survive even that." "Understood." "Sir." The Commandant studied her for a long moment, and Maya thought she detected something like approval in his amber gaze. "Very well. Report to Captain Morrison for preliminary briefing. You depart in 72 hours. Maya stood and saluted crisply before turning to leave. She was almost to the door when Veltar's voice stopped her. "Cadet Rodriguez." She turned back to face him. "For what it's worth, I think Zilketh underestimates your species. I've read the reports from your homeworlds. Military conflicts. Humans have a certain persistence that other species lack." Maya felt a brief smile tug at her lips. "Thank you, sir." The corridor outside seemed brighter as she made her way toward Captain Morrison's office. Jake Morrison was one of only 3 humans to have ever graduated from the Galactic Military Academy, and he had served as Maya's informal mentor throughout her time at the station. His office was smaller than the Commandant's, but felt warmer, decorated with mementos from various worlds and conflicts. Morrison looked up from his desk as she entered, and his expression immediately darkened when he saw her face. "They gave you the crucible," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Morrison leaned back in his chair and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Maya, I won't lie to you. Kethmoran is a nightmare world. Acidic atmosphere, crushing gravity, predators that would make a Terran tiger look like a house cat. The Academy uses it to test their toughest species because most others simply can't survive there. But humans can? Maybe. Our adaptability has always been our greatest strength. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're remarkably good at figuring out how to survive in places we have no business being. Morrison stood and moved to a secure cabinet, withdrawing a sealed data packet. This contains everything we know about Kethmoran. Study it carefully. Learn the terrain, the native life forms, the environmental hazards. Knowledge will keep you alive longer than any natural armor. Maya took the packet, feeling its weight in her hands. Captain, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do they hate us so much? The other species, I mean. What are they so afraid of? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the viewport at the stars beyond. Because we remind them of something they'd rather forget, he said finally. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that were relatively stable, relatively safe. They developed technology and civilization without facing constant existential threats. And humans? We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, diseases, natural disasters. Earth shaped us into survivors, and that makes the other species nervous. They look at us and see their own prehistoric ancestors, the violent, desperate creatures they evolved. Past. Maya nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. So this test isn't really about my qualifications. No. It's about proving that humans are either too dangerous to trust or too weak to matter. Either way, Zilketh wins. Maya felt the cold anger in her chest crystallize into something harder, more focused. Then I guess I'll have to disappoint him. Morrison smiled, and for the first time since receiving her assignment, Maya felt truly confident. That's the spirit. Now let's get you prepared to show these aliens what a Deathworlder can really do. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation and study. Maya memorized topographical maps of Kethmoran, studied the biochemistry of its native flora and fauna, and practiced with the basic survival equipment she would be allowed to carry. Her roommate Lyra, a gentle crystalline being who processed nutrients through photosynthesis, watched with growing distress. "Please, Maya," Lyra said on the final night, her crystalline structure flickering with emotional patterns. "Request a transfer. There is no shame in choosing wisdom over pride." Maya looked up from her equipment check and smiled. "It's not about pride, Lyra. It's about showing them that they can't scare us away." "But what if you die?" Maya sealed her pack and stood ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. "Then at least they'll know we don't go down easy."